All right, let's do this. This is our Tundra. There are many like it, but this one is ours. Say hello to our 2021 Toyota Tundra in the 1794 edition trim, which we've recently named Grizzly, or the Grizz, because of its new matte brown coat, if you will. But more on the mods later on. Now, there are already a ton of videos on this popular platform, so we're not going to dive into the typical specs. What we are going to cover is why we are building this platform and why we avoided the new V6 Turbo Tundras, and then we'll go over some of the first mods that are on our upgrade list. Now, if you're new here, you might be wondering, who are we? We are Lifestyle Overland, a family of four who have been overlanding and exploring North America and beyond since 2014 in our 2014 4Runner, 2016 Lexus GX460, and occasionally our 1980 Land Cruiser Troopy. Since 2018, we've been full-time creators who have spent most of our time on the trails, so we're no strangers to putting builds through some relentless testing. But now, with our growing family, including a new kid and puppy, it's time to try something a little bit different as our primary adventure and tow rig. Now, with all the tempting options out there, why a Tundra? And specifically, why a second Gen Tundra? Now, in our book, the true definition of an overland vehicle, number one, it's something that has to be reliable. And it's something that has to be proven over time. The idea is that you're building something to take you into the wilderness and bring you back out without too much drama. This Toyota Tundra has a 3URFE engine in it with multiple cases with over 400,000 miles, some of them with over 1 million miles. So it checks the box when it comes to reliability. And then the next piece is durability. So, okay, it starts and it runs. But what about all the components? What about the suspension? How is it going to put up with all of that extra vibration and all those miles off-road? So it has to have something with a history of being able to put up with that kind of abuse. And the next, payload. Can you put everything on that vehicle, or will it tow the trailer that you prefer behind it? These are important numbers to look at before you even go down that path, because it's really easy to overload these vehicles super fast. The next component to a great overland rig is something that has parts availability, whether that's new parts that are on the shelf at parts stores, or even just a plethora of used parts at a junkyard somewhere, so that you can continue to fix and maintain and upgrade your vehicle of choice. Another key factor is how much information is out there on your particular vehicle. Are you an early adopter and so things are going to have to be figured out as you go? Or is it something that's been on the road for a decade or more? And so all of the weaknesses have been worked through, all of the fixes have been figured out, all the things to be mindful of are on the table from the get-go. That's another huge advantage of choosing a platform that has been on the road for a long time. Now, I will confess, the YouTuber struggle is real, and the keeping up with Joneses thing is real. I mean, we all want the newest, latest, greatest, fanciest thing. We love new technology. We love the gadgets and stuff. And so, yeah, I am just a little bit jealous when I see another YouTuber with some fancy new vehicle out there, forging the way, forging the path, being an early adopter, testing it and figuring out its strengths and its weaknesses, and working with companies to develop products. That's fun. But our channel and what we try to focus on is encouraging folks to go with something that gets them home. Because nothing puts a damper on a family wilderness trip like mechanical failures, or maybe just a recall that puts your rig in the shop for weeks or months at a time. And there's a lot to be said for building something yourself, starting with something that is older, gives you more of a budget, to go and make it into something that reflects your personality and your adventure style. But most importantly, you learn about your rig. So if something goes wrong out there in the wild, more than likely you're going to know what to do because you built most of it. And then finally, affordability in your choice of rig is super important when you want to build. Going used is a way to expand that budget. Now, you don't have to get the latest and greatest. You don't have to go with long travel and kings. I recommend you start with a good four-wheel drive, good tires, and go, because the rest can come in time. So don't ever watch our show and feel excluded or jealous, because you can do the same with many different platforms and a lot less mods. This is our day job, so we need mods to keep us interested and excited and to continue testing different things and learning different things about different platforms and what works and what doesn't work. And that's why I'm just super duper excited to start building this thing out. Now, if you've been following us for any amount of time, then you'll know that back in 2019, we did that with the GX. Same principle, proven platform. It's a Toyota Prado. It's been used in Australia for years. It's just badged as a Lexus here in the States. We knew that was a great platform, and truthfully, Lexus has even higher quality standards than Toyota. And that particular model is actually more affordable as a used unit when you compare it to other 4Runners of similar years and trims. So if you're interested in that as a potential option, make sure you check out the playlist down below for the GX build and consider that as you're walking through this process. Now, the ultimate thing to remember is that there is no perfect platform. Every single one of them has its pros and its cons and its trade-offs. There's only one perfect platform, and that is the one for you and your use case. So maybe you're wondering by now, why not the new Tundra or the new GX 550? Well, for starters, I drove the new Tundra on the Dalton Highway this last winter with my good friend Craig, and let me tell you, it was nice. I loved the tech, I loved the big screen, I loved the ride, I loved almost everything about it. But the problem was that the price jump from the previous Tundra to the new Tundra was just too big of a stretch, honestly. And then when you consider these principles that I just went over, it's unproven in the long term. There's going to be longer lead times for mods. That's quickly improving. There are fewer replacement parts available, which could increase your downtime, and then not as much data by the new owners, relatively speaking, to the previous Tundra. It's an expensive investment for a trail rig, and you're going to deal with some increased depreciation over some of the other options. Another concern was, the new V6 with the turbos and maybe even the hybrid system. It just adds complications to the maintenance and repairs and potentially the reliability. And there's not much increase in fuel mileage after building one of those out compared to the previous gens, and that's per the internet, of course. But when you look at the cost difference, it doesn't really justify it to go with the new Tundra for any kind of fuel efficiency savings. And of course, the elephant in the room and the headlines across all of YouTube is the recalls and the blown engines on the new Tundras. And I'm confident Toyota is going to figure that out. But that's not a risk that we want to run ourselves. And then as to the GX 550, I loved our test drive. And I was very, very impressed with the Lexus people. I was very impressed with their continued dedication to quality. But that one, for us, it's the price. It's just astronomical when we're going to take this thing out and beat it to pieces. Now, if Lexus wants to loan us one, we're here for you. But at the end of the day, we really preferred having a mod budget for suspension, tires, storage, and all the other bits and pieces. So simply put, our use case just didn't warrant that price. Now, I would say for those of you who are shopping, if I was looking for a primary commuter, then I would probably consider, either the new Tundra, the new Land Cruiser that's coming out, the new 4Runner, or even the GX 550. But for our primary use case of just go, go, go on the trails all the time, it just wasn't going to be a great strategy for us in the long term. Now, the downsides of this second gen Tundra. Well, obviously, number one, fuel mileage. Now, it's not far off from the new Tundra, especially once you've got two built units side by side. And I know that's probably a point of argument. So if you have one or the other of the Tundras, please let me know down in the comments kind of what fuel mileage you're getting and whether or not you have a built Tundra. I am curious to hear more from real world use folks. Now, one of the downsides, and honestly this surprised me once I started diving in and researching this platform, is the simple fact that it has a similar payload as a 4Runner. As a matter of fact, this particular model behind me has 20 pounds less on paper than what a 4Runner can haul. Now, you can dig into this, and some of that data seems to suggest that this was done intentionally by Toyota so they could focus on comfort and towing capacity, safety, and off-road capabilities, which would eventually lead one to think that maybe it can handle more than the sticker rating. but I'm not suggesting that anyone exceed it. One of its black eyes is just simply the fact that it's outdated tech by the more recent comparisons with the bigger screens and more bells and whistles. But what you gain is something that has been worked through. It's stable. It's not going to be giving you glitches and needing constant dealer updates and things like that, like we've seen with some of the new Tundras. Now, I will say one of the disappointing things for me once I actually got this in hand was the fact that it's just not the same fit and finish as a Japanese built 4Runner or GX460, which is surprising, being as that this is one of the most American made trucks, if the internet is correct. Things like the door handles and just the touch and the feel of so many different pieces, the rattles that just inexplicably come out of nowhere. It was a little bit surprising, to be honest with you. I get in my 4Runner, the door handles are solid, there's just no wiggle. I get in these guys and I'm like, this feels kind of like a kid's toy in some places. And then obviously compared to our previous vehicles, the 4Runner and the GX460, the Tundra is longer, wider, and heavier, which means there's going to be limitations on access to trails. Now the good news is we'll still have our 4Runner for the tighter stuff if we want to go and get crazy with it. But we are going to have to be mindful of our size and our weight and our width, and especially that breakover, because we're a lot longer in this than we are in the 4Runner. Now, as far as common issues, not a lot, to be honest with you, through my research anyhow. Typically, water pumps tend to go out around 60,000 miles, fairly straightforward replacement. It does have some particular oil leaks. Some are more prevalent in different years. But there's a lot of information out there that you can dig into for a particular model or trim that you're looking at buying. Now for the 2019 through 2021, like this one sitting behind me here, Toyota decided to delete the transmission cooler. Now, that's a rabbit hole on the internet for you, but it's arguable if this was a real issue or not, because apparently these transmissions are absolutely bulletproof. And so it sounds to me like they decided, hey, as long as they're changing their transmission fluid often enough for how much towing they're doing, then maybe it's not really something that needs to be added into the system. Now there are aftermarket options for adding that in. Definitely comment below if you've had transmission heat issues. I'm very curious to hear what other folks have experienced, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of concern from the mechanic side of things. Now, another thing that I noticed after a few miles is the frame flex on the Tundra is palpable. When you're driving on the concrete roads in Salt Lake City, there's keyways, and so you have this undulation that happens, and you hit those things just right, and it feels like a freaking bucking horse. I mean, it's rough. Now, I know tire size has a lot to do with that, and so we'll probably get a much smoother ride once we go to a larger tire, but it's just something to be mindful of. I found it to be pretty annoying if you're running over those bumps at the right cadence. And then I mentioned just a minute ago, just the infotainment center could use some updating, but I gotta be honest, the one in this 2021, I'm very happy with. I may change it out just so I can kind of report on other things that are in the market for you guys, but I've enjoyed it. The Android Auto has worked spectacularly. Connection has been great. Sound is great. And that is one of the nice benefits of the 1794 is you do get a little bit of an upgraded sound system, but it's still not gonna rattle the roof. It's good. It's okay. A couple more little things that I'm not super happy about is my driver's seat has a pop. So if you lean back in it, or if you put on the brakes and the seat kind of leans back forward again, it feels like there's a loose bolt or a loose rivet or something in the slide itself. So it's just like this clunk, clunk, but it's just not something that you would really expect from a Toyota vehicle. And then the transmission is a little bit sloppy. It does a lot of hunting when the trailer is not behind it. You pop it into tow and haul mode and it's great. It's firm. It's very much, you can anticipate what it's going to do. Not in tow haul mode, who knows? Now this is all going to change as we add weight and as we add bigger tires and things like that. So I'll report back on if that improves at all. We might even look at some way of tuning it if it becomes an issue. Now, why is this the best platform for us, the Lifestyle Overland family? Well, for starters, it's the cabin size. Sarah and I are both tall people. We've got 2 kids. Caroline is already almost as tall as Sarah. We've got camera gear, we've got a new puppy, and so having all that extra cabin space is going to be huge. And just a little bit of an example, the Tundra is 39 inches longer than our 4Runner and ends up having a 3-foot longer wheelbase and 4-inch wider body, but that gives us 10 extra inches of legroom in the rear with another 1.5 inches more legroom in the front seat. And it's actually more than that, just depending on how you position. But let me tell you, if you have car seats, especially rear-facing car seats, and you try to put those in a Tundra, you try to put those in a Tacoma, you try to put those in a GX, and you find out real quick, whoever's in front of that car seat is jammed right up into the dash. And so, yeah, that was one of our big motivations, going to something with a lot more space in that back seat for the kids and the dog. Now with these larger dimensions, that ends up meaning that it weighs about 1,000 pounds more, starting out stock versus stock to a 4Runner. But the nice part is you end up with 111 more horsepower and 123 more foot-pounds of torque over the 4Runner. And the nice part is the peak torque is at 3,600 RPMs on the Tundra, not 4,400 on the 4Runner, which means you're going to get a more pleasurable towing experience running at that lower RPM. And while the 4Runner has done great, I have no problem running it at 5,000 RPM. It does begin to wear on you. In the back of your mind, especially if you've used V8s in the past, using that 4.0 V6, you just feel like it's going to blow any moment. It never has. It's done great. We're at 207,000 miles or more on the 4Runner, and she's still doing awesome. But it's a much more pleasurable experience if you can bring those RPMs down and you don't feel like your vehicle is having to work as hard to pull that next hill. And another advantage that's going to help all of that is the fact that the Tundra has a 6-speed transmission as opposed to the 4Runner, which is only a 5-speed. So acceleration is a game changer in the Tundra. The 4Runner, you'll get there eventually, but without re-gearing, towing does become quite a chore. Now, even though it is a lot heavier than the 4Runner, it's still going to be well suited for what we do here out west. I might not recommend a full-size vehicle to someone who's going to be on the East Coast trying to run through tight forested areas, maybe even places in the Pacific Northwest. It's just something to be mindful of. You don't want to be too limited if your region of exploration has traditionally narrow trails. So be thinking about where you're going to explore and really apply that hard to your decision on what you want to build. Now, I posted on Patreon and asked our supporters if they had any questions as to why we went with this particular platform. And I've already answered a bunch of their questions here, but one of the questions was, am I concerned about the dust that's going to be in the truck bed itself? And that is going to be a factor. But if you remember, we went to Alaska and we rented the Tacoma, which had a smart cap on the back. And what we found was like we really enjoyed having a clear separation between passengers and your everyday stuff, your cups, your snacks, and the kids' toys versus your camping gear and things like that, so that you're not listening to the rattles, you're not having things shift around and potentially endanger your family if you were in a rollover or a crash or just a hard braking incident. Sometimes it's hard to remember to secure all those things. And so having a clear separation inside of the back of the Tundra is going to be a huge improvement. I'm looking forward to trying it out. And the nice part about the canopy that I'm going to show you here eventually is the fact that there's no windows. So it's a little bit more secure, not to mention the fact that the drawers that we're installing in the rear as well can be locked. So it's going to be a big step up in security for a lot of our gear. Now, the advantage of the bigger footprint, bigger dimensions, is the fact that there's a large roof area. So yes, we're going to get our kayaks back out. Going to come up with some ways to mount that up top. But there's room for bikes and even a future tent if we want to shift this over to doing kind of some standalone trips as well. So it's got a lot of versatility with its footprint. Now, one of the biggest factors for all of us is the affordability. The new Tundras, they start around $45,000 for a base model SR5, and they can push up to and over 80,000 for the TRD Pros and the Capstones and things like that. The 2021, if you pick the last year of the V8s, you can find 1794 editions or limiteds under 50,000 miles for around 35,000 to 40,000. Now, that's still not cheap, but doggone it, these car prices have gone nuts. So relatively speaking, you're around half of what a new Tundra costs. Now, if you're okay with going a little bit older with a lot more miles, then you can get a 2008 to 2016 Tundra with under 150,000 miles for around starting out like 15,000 bucks. So that's really, really attainable, especially if you're just looking to build a dedicated rig that you don't need to rely on driving back and forth to work and things like that. So it's a really inexpensive platform to get started with. Now, if you're like me and you sit down and you consider $80,000 for a new top-of-the-line Tundra or $40,000 for a slightly used top-of-the-line second-gen Tundra, well, that's like putting $40,000 in your pocket for other bits and pieces. At least I think that's how that math works. Now, if you're looking for a fast and easy way to get out there, just keep an eye out for some of these pre-built rigs and you can save a ton of cash. 9 times out of 10, they trade those vehicles in at the dealership, and the markup on those compared to one that is stock sitting right next to it is not that much. So if it looks like a quality build and it's got some quality components, you can save a boatload of money. You just got to be willing to trust the previous owner's installations. We just recommend that if you're looking to go this route, watch videos on common issues, get familiar with different things from different years to be aware of, and then when that cream puff pops up, and it will, if you're shopping every day on Facebook Marketplace and Auto Trader and stuff like that, when it pops up, be ready to lock it down. Be ready to have a deposit. Be ready to hop on a plane and get over there and get that thing picked up. All right, so why this particular 1794 edition? What was it that caught our attention? Well, it hits multiple marks on our wish list. For starters, it's a 38-gallon fuel tank. That's from the factory, and there's no aftermarket issues to deal with that. Now, technically, it's really only like 32 gallons because Toyota likes a 6-gallon reserve, which helps protect the fuel pump and things like that, but still, that's a big jump. It already has a built-in tow package with a brake controller. This particular unit only had 29,000 miles on the odometer, and it's in pristine condition with just a single owner. It's got a few chips here and there, but nothing to be worried about. Now, the biggest thing for me was I want a pedigree. Now, when we bought our GX460, that was a certified GX460. It had every oil change, every brake pad replacement, every single thing had been documented at a Toyota or Lexus dealership. And what that did was it allowed it to have a factory warranty for an extended amount of time. So look at those low mileage ones and you can still, at least for the next year or so, you can still get some certified Tundras. So if you are worried and you do want to have something like that just as a backup, they're still out there, but you got to jump on it. Now, honestly, I was actually more interested in the pedigree, knowing that it had been maintained, knowing that the oil changes had taken place. So if I ever wanted to install a supercharger, which will net about 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, I know I've got good bones to install it on top of. And then next, it's a luxury interior. It's beautiful. It feels like a Lexus interior. And the nice part is, it's not just heated, it's also ventilated seats, which I believe you can't even get on a TRD Pro. I believe the TRD Pro is only heated. Correct me down below if I'm wrong. And like I mentioned before, it's got the JBL premium audio, which is, it's okay. Dual zone climate control, which is really, really handy. Sadly, no rear zone for the kids, so you're gonna have to make sure that you've got it set for whatever they need back there as well. And then, warning, if you go with a 1794, there are no factory skids underneath that puppy. So that leads us to the question of, well, why didn't you go with a TRD Pro, which already had a lot of those things underneath? If you wanted an off-the-shelf package that's going to get you on the trail, then the TRD Pro is a good option. But just remember, it comes at a premium price. And the benefits of that are going to be negated if you start swapping out suspension components and things like that. So have a plan on what you want to do. If you want a TRD Pro that you can just load up and get out on trail with, then don't plan on making any upgrades. Pay that premium for it, load it up, rock and roll. If you're going to be building something, then look at the 1794 if you absolutely need the beautiful interior. But if I was to do it on a budget, I would do SR5, and then I would just go from there. I would put good tires on it, and then I would just go. And you can get started really inexpensively with the SR5. Now, another question that we received is, hey, you've been running SUV style vehicles for quite some time. Why didn't you go with a second gen Sequoia? Well, like I mentioned before, I really wanted that separation of equipment. Now, the Sequoia, the second gen Sequoia, is another inexpensive, very capable vehicle. I would highly recommend it if you've got a large family. If you've got 3 or more kids, then the second gen Sequoia, look hard at it. They're very, very tasty options. And then another question that I received from a patron was, why Toyota and not another brand or even a diesel truck of some sort? Well, my background actually comes from GM. My dad had an 83 Scottsdale that we loved. I actually restored it from ground up, swapped it from a 305 to a 350, had Flowmasters. It was amazing. And so my first truck was a 96 Silverado with a 6.5 diesel in it, and it was nothing but problems. Later on, I got a 2002. Love that truck. Her name was Gertrude. It's the one I dated Sarah in. It was awesome. But not far after 100,000 miles, I started having issues with the lifters. And then from there on, every single Silverado or GMC Sierra that I bought, the quality just wasn't there. So when I switched to a Toyota and I got to experience the quality of the different components and reliability, and then to test them as hard as we have tested them, to put over 200,000 miles on the 4Runner under off-road and towing conditions for the most part, and to see it perform the way that it did, it's really, really hard to go, hey, let's try something new. The other problem is diesel systems in the United States have so many complicated systems tied to it with your DEF fluid and things like that. And you don't really net the fuel mileage when you consider how much more expensive it is to maintain. So I wasn't really interested in taking that risk. Now, I know a lot of folks who have their Dodge Prospect, I get in trouble for saying Dodge, Ram Prospectors and things like that, and they absolutely love them. And you know, I've ridden with some friends who have them, and they are sick. They are awesome, but that's just not us. It's just not our style right now. Not saying we'll never do it, but Toyota has been good to us, and so as long as I have young kids that I want to make sure that I can get back home, we'll probably be driving a Toyota. So to summarize, at the end of the day, we wanted something that was new and fresh to experiment with, that had more room for our growing family and more power to make the drives a little more pleasurable. Now, we know this platform comes with trade-offs in access and fuel mileage, but we're confident that it's got enough benefits to offset those downsides. And when it comes to fuel efficiency, if the reports about the third gen real-world efficiencies are true, then we're not really missing out on much savings, and we're gaining a ton of reliability and mechanical simplicity. So at the end of the day, we decided to go with a platform that has millions and millions of miles of on-road testing, lots and lots of parts availability, lots and lots of mod availability, and the simplicity to allow us to work on it ourselves. All in a package that's going to give us room for our growing family. I am so excited to get busy building this thing. Now, we've already done a few things, as you can maybe see behind me here. Now, I know a lot of you are wondering what we're going to do. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the stage 1 build plan. Now, as you know, you can run this in its stock form, but we know our use case and we know the goals that we have for our travels. So we're diving right in on the first round of upgrades for an upcoming trip to Idaho. We don't want to spend our entire summer in the garage if we can help it. We want to get some critical things installed and get out there. So for starters, suspension. You always have the struggle between, do you do suspension first or do protection first? And we're actually doing them both at the same time. So ideally, you do your suspension, you lift your vehicle to get it out of harm's way, and you protect it with skid plates all at the same time, as well as rock sliders. So we're going to be doing a 3-inch mid-travel suspension kit with some upgraded upper control arms. We're going to go with a quality mud terrain in 285/70 R18, which is going to be roughly a 35-inch tire, but a little bit narrower so that we're not jamming into the body mounts and things like that. We want to avoid rub as much as possible. And that's why we're going with an 18-inch wheel with enough positive offset to try and keep them under the wheel wells, which is going to reduce all that mud slinging and stuff. And then we're going to be doing matching wheels and tires on the trailer as well. So we can swap a spare from the trailer to the vehicle and vice versa, just depending on the situation. As I mentioned before, payload is a struggle here. And after figuring up all the different mods and stuff, we're going to be around 1,000 pounds in the rear. Now, don't get too concerned. 400 pounds of that is from the trailer itself, the tongue weight of the trailer. So we're doing a custom rear leaf spring with a U-bolt flip so that we're going to have as much clearance underneath that axle as possible. Now, seeing as how this 1794 came with 0 skid plates underneath, that is one of our highest priorities. So we will have underbelly protection under the engine, under the transmission, and then also underneath that massive 38-gallon fuel tank, along with some rock sliders. Now, bumpers, those will come later on down the road, but we're not in a big rush to add that on just yet. When it comes to storage, we have a Bush Company, this is brand new, it's a Bush Company canopy, and those folks are actually official build partners with us on this. So shout out to Barry down there in Phoenix. Thank you so much for all your help getting this Bush Company canopy installed. I'm really blown away by the quality and the functionality. And then we're going to have some MSA 4x4 drawer slides in the bed of this thing, and those are full-length drawers as well. It's not that 3/4 pull where you got to move stuff around to get everything out. So they're really, really well built. And again, they're locking too, so a little bit of added security for everything that's going to go in those. And then finally, there's something that we haven't done much of on our builds, and that is cosmetic improvements. You know, we've not been concerned about scratches in the past. You can take a look at the sides of Silver. She's been absolutely destroyed. There's not much clear coat left from all of the hits and strikes that she's taken. So this time around, we thought, hey, you know what? Let's have some fun. Let's make this ours. Let's customize a few things. And so what we've done, number one, is this massive chrome grille up front is getting replaced with a TRD grille. So we're going to be losing all this chrome, and that replacement is actually color matched to the current color of the vehicle. And then we've had Expel paint protection film. Now this is self-healing clear matte film that has been wrapped over all of the painted surfaces. I'm really, really curious to see how this performs. From what I've read, from what I've heard, it's really spectacular. It's a lot thicker than like a vinyl wrap. So it's supposed to take some of these scratches a lot better. It's also got a 10-year warranty as opposed to a lot of vinyl wraps where you're doing good to even get a 2-year warranty out of it. So it should be an interesting product test. And then we also did the Expel ceramic window tint, which, let me tell you, in this summer heat right now has made a massive improvement on the heat inside of the cabin itself. So huge shout out to Pete and team down there at DC Customs in Bountiful, Utah. You guys, you rock. This thing looks spectacular. I can't wait to show you guys more film as we dig into this build a little bit more. We've also kind of declared war on chrome, so pretty much every chrome surface on this truck is going to get blacked out in some way, shape, or form, which should give it kind of a more modern feel, I think. And then finally, we do have one big task ahead of us before our big trip, and that is getting a charge line from the factory system to an Anderson plug in the rear so that we can plug in the trailer and charge through the DC system as we're traveling down the road. And finally, when it comes to powertrain improvements, we're currently exchanging emails with another potential build partner about something super exciting. So stay tuned. All right, so what do you think? Is the second Gen Tundra on your radar now? And if it is, what would be your first upgrades? Or would you rent it like it is? Would you just get out there and go? Let me know down below, and make sure you're subscribed to watch this build unfold. But until next time, remember, stay curious and leave it better than you found it.